Okay, streaming live now. So Albert, it's streaming. It's live now. Can everyone see? Hey, let me see. Can everyone see the YouTube? I don't see it. Let me just double check. Okay, streaming live.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, we've got this now.
Okay.
Good evening, all, and welcome to Module 7. We shall be starting momentarily. Dr. Joshua Safo will be taking you through this module. Doc, are you on?
Very well. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Let me pull up the slide.
That's fine.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Great. Doc, you have the floor. Over to you, sir. I'll just be on mute and in the background.
All right. That should be fine. Okay, so good evening to you all, and very happy to be joining you for this narrative as we continue the African Leadership Group, School of Leadership and Governance. I trust I can be heard so that I move on.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, so for tonight, as we continue our next module, it is with a topic, building stronger communities through civic engagement. Building stronger communities through civic engagement. And we are trusting that we'll be able to have an enjoyable session as we also continue with the Q&A as well. The next slide. Okay, so by way of introduction, my name is Joshua Opon-Safo. I'm in Ghana, and I happen to be the founding leader for the New African Concepts. is actually a movement which resonates with the subject matter we have for tonight, that is the civic engagement. We do that a lot. The goal, as the name suggests, we see a new Africa. We believe in Africa a lot, that things can change. And we employ various elements from advocacy, conferences, and most especially mentorship. All these are employed with the ultimate goal of seeing a transformed Africa. And there are other engagements of mine as well with consultancy, apologetics, and life coaching. The next slide. So as we run through, we should keep our eye on the ball on these 4 elements. We are hoping that by the time we are done, primarily or basically, we should be able to analyze the role of civic engagement in African context. Now, the context is very important. We call it contextualism. The reason is that there may be certain things and how it is being done in other parts of the world, like maybe Europe or America or possibly Asia. But when you put it in the African context, there may be the need for
Mentor Joshua, we've lost you there.
Can I proceed? Can I be heard?
Can you take that context again? Because we lost the latter bit. I think the network dropped.
Yes. Okay. So I was on the fact that there may be certain things which may be working in other parts of the world, like Europe, America, or even possibly Asia. Now, in transposing these ideas, one must be careful not to just take it hook, line, and sinker, but rather we must place it within the African context because of variations in culture, variations in perspectives, variations in various elements, how we do our politics, how we do our religion, and many other factors. So we should keep that in mind, that the civic engagement, we are looking at that of the African context. Also, exploring the local or indigenous knowledge systems and leadership models. So that is also one of, it is still in sync with the context that within our setting, there are certain traditional knowledge systems and leadership models that we may also be able to employ as we go on the element of civic education. Number 3 is to develop strategies for inclusive community participation. So the aspect of community as against the individualism, particularly the marginalized groups like the youth, the women, and then rural populations. That it will not be a skewed element, but it will be an all-inclusive element. And then finally, how we can apply these in the addressing contemporary African challenges. So the tools like advocacy, and now with technology presents us a very strong base where we can ride on, and many others that we'll be looking at to drive changes in our contemporary setting. So the next slide. So briefly, what then is civic engagement? As always, we'll have to start with some element of definitions to give us some perspectives to the subject matter. So basically, it is the participation of individuals and groups in activities that address public concerns. So any level of engagement that is geared towards addressing any aspect of public concern can be considered as a civic engagement. Also, we could consider it as the participation in activities that improve one's community and society, which means that it encompasses political, social, economic, environmental, community action. So there are several actions along several elements that all must have an end. So at this point, we should have one key thing in mind, that civic engagement must always have an ultimate goal or an end. Now, if this is missing in the narrative, we will, out of zeal or for other ulterior motives, just engage some of these civic engagements. And especially in our context, without doubt, there are some people that get into it for their personal gains. So they write, or they may even start a movement, an organization, an advocacy group, or whatever it may be. But beneath it, instead of meeting the ultimate goal of improving the community and society, it is rather geared towards fixing themselves. So they are looking at, so they are looking at how they can ride on it to get certain funds, so funding and many other elements. So it's very important at this point to note that the end goal of civic engagements, any form of or shape that it takes, is to improve one's community and then society. The next slide. So there are various forms or types of civic engagement. It could be the civic learning, it could be political engagement. So in civic learning, it deals with nationalism, things about the giving society, and many other things that goes into the civic learning. Or political engagement, which is also another very, very important area. Mind you, as we go along, you should be thinking around the African context, which is very, very key. So the political engagement, also, we could have the philanthropy and fundraising. So more or less like the funding aspect. And all these are very, very important. We could look at activism and advocacy. I think many of the civic engagements embrace this aspect of advocacy. And there are also community services and volunteerism. Most of us will agree that volunteerism is almost becoming a lost art. It's almost becoming a lost value in our system. It is almost that now any service one renders, he's thinking about what is there for me to gain. The quest of materialism relative to the poverty or the issues we are having in our continent or sub-region has made us to overlook volunteerism, but it is one of the elements of civic engagements that can drive a lot of change through community service and volunteerism. Also, the aspect of service learning, community engaging research. So this comes with the academia or people in research. Once again, context. Many decisions and many policies in the Western world are backed by data and research. Here in our context, it is more of the policies by the government ride much more on populism. We are looking at what is going to make us popular, what is going to make the citizens literally sing our praises, especially the polarized partisan politics that we have in our system. So we are looking at a growing civic engagement, and that areas like research that will provide data so that now our policies that we'll be making will be backed by data or research base. And then we also have the community engaged internship, and then ownership, and then social innovation. So all these are various forms. Definitely, it is not exhaustive. Definitely, it is not exhaustive, but at least it gives us a fair idea of men when it comes to the civic engagement. Okay, so the next slide. So what therefore becomes the importance of civic engagement? Several of them. It strengthens democracy and governance, because in democracy, it gives room for thought sharing and perspectives. Now, one thing about democracy is that, as we know, as its basic definition, it is a government of the people, for the people, by the people. So unlike how it is operationalized in many African countries, where it is almost like the political party in power is literally running everything or running the show, and then the citizens have become very passive. They are almost like they have taken a backseat, watching how the political players will unfold the dream. It doesn't work that way. And that could be another discussion for another time. And now you could see that there is a growing concern concerning whether or not democracy is really an African thing, especially looking at the narrative with Ibrahim of Burkina Faso. So there is a growing concern within the political ecosystem for whether we should latch onto what is usually called benevolent autocracy as against the kind of democracy that seemed to be hijacked by some political elite. So a civic engagement is crucial because it becomes an all-encompassing thing where now the citizens are involved in the daily machinery of governance, unlike many places where it is only like the voting, as you can see in the diagram over there, that it is almost like when it comes to democracy, we are known for voting. But democracy goes beyond just the electoral processes. It is just one of it. It also includes the active participation of the citizenry in everyday governance. And civic engagement provide a viable platform that strengthens true democracy and governance. Also, it builds trust and accountability. And then also because it engages the citizenry, definitely the element of trust and accountability becomes a natural conclusion of it. It encourages inclusive participation, and all these are obvious derivatives of the active participation of citizens in the daily running of the nation, of the society. It drives local and national development. We've said in the earlier slide that the end goal of civic engagement is not for personal gains, not to ride on the popularity it will give you, or the influence, or the funding, or the platform it will give you to just push a parochial interest, but rather it must be for the common good of the people. So it drives local and national development. Definitely, it means it will improve the quality of life of persons and the nation, and then stronger local economies, reduce crime and violence, because many of these people who would be engaged possibly in crime and violence, there are other avenues that they can pipe or channel their energies rather than crime and violence. And then greater trust in institutions, empowered and informed citizens, which ultimately also strengthens democracy and governance. The next slide. So the key stakeholders in civic engagement, literally the first point summarizes everything: citizens. So the citizenry and then the governance or the governing leadership all together becomes the stakeholders. If you are to open up the scope of the citizenry, then you can get the aspect of the media, you can get the educational institutions, you can get the religious institutions or leaders, and then the cultural or the traditional leaders. So the traditional leaders, the religious leaders, the media, the academia or the educational institutions, as well as the local government, all together become the stakeholders. It means that when it comes to civic engagement, the leadership of every nation, together with an active citizenry participation, drives and forms the stakeholders for civic engagement. The next one. So there, we've shared various types and forms. So when it is set in motion, we are looking at individuals or groups taking concrete steps. Now that is, as we go along, I'll touch on 2 or 3 very key elements. So we should keep this in mind. Concrete steps to address community issues or promote the public good. So ultimately, it is about the common good of the people. So these are some of the examples: the youth-led cleanup campaigns, participatory budgeting in local governments, faith-based community outreach. Now, once again, context, the context of Africa. Now, we as a people, we are driven more by reactionary. This point is very important, and I crave your indulgence on this very well, that we are driven more by reactionary engagements. That is to say that we lack much of what is called systemic thinking. Systemic thinking is to think in structures, systems, processes, procedures, principles, with the ultimate goal of helping to curb or solve that issue in a comprehensive manner. That is basically what systemic thinking or analysis is about. So it is also another subject on its own. But here in Africa, or majority of us, we are more reactionary. To be reactionary means that when a problem happens, we are looking at just the immediate rather than the ultimate. So most at times, our civic engagements focus on the reactionary attendance to the problem rather than the systemic approach of comprehensively solving that problem. Now, I'm in Ghana. Here, currently, it is raining. And in the capital city, in Accra, we are battling with flooding, of issues of flooding. This is not a contemporary issue per se, because as late as even the 1950s, even the 1940s, there are articles and there are pictures from that era still bemoaning the menace of flooding. Surprisingly enough, over 68 years post-independence, our capital city and many major cities in our nation, we are still battling with element of flooding. Now, this is a typical example of lack of systemic thinking. Now, we have a whole agency we call here as NADMO, and that is the National Disaster. Now, they attend to disasters like flooding. So when there is death or when there is loss of properties, when there is loss of things like that, there is a whole agency set up to attend to the products or the victims, rather, the victims of the flooding. And not only flooding, any other national disaster that may happen. Now, 68 years down the line, we are focusing on NADMO, and we allocate huge budgetary allocations to it to attend to the reactionary elements of the floods and any other disasters that will come our way. little have we given to the systemic comprehensive approach that how do we comprehensively deal with the menace of flooding or the disasters that may happen. So this is one of it. So our campaigns, for instance, if we are embarking on cleanup campaigns, it should be a part of a major plan. Else, if we just embark on cleanup campaigns, that is why I said earlier that there must always be an end goal with civic engagement. What is the end goal of cleanup campaigns? Is the end goal to have sustainable sanitation or combating poor sanitation? If that is the end goal, then without doubt, cleanup campaigns alone of itself does not have what it takes to bring about that end goal. So it means that cleanup campaigns, as good as they are, must be seen as part of a bigger plan. It means that through systemic thinking, other elements will come into play. And through this, we can have that all-inclusive participation. And when we work at it, the ultimate goal is that after some time, we will see that our burden of poor sanitation is off the scene. So that is one key thing we should keep in mind. The need for systemic analysis when we are rolling out any element of civic engagement. Else we can run a particular civic engagement for 50 years, advocacy and things, and then there will be very little to show for when it comes to its tangible change, because we focus much more on isolated elements rather than seeing it as a comprehensive whole. The next slide. The next slide, if you can hear me. Great. So as good as civic engagements are, and definitely is, definitely there will also be certain barriers. We'll have to press our way. Once again, we should think of the African context, apathy or lack of interest. For many people, when it comes to civic engagement, they don't even see the reason or the need why they should give themselves to it. There is apathy, and the apathy has multi-dimensional or multifactorial contributions. There are several reasons why the average African is not driven much more towards civic engagement. And as I gave an earlier caveat, that there are even those who are in civic engagement with a self or ulterior motive. Though it may appear they may be looking at the common good of the people, beneath it is their personal parochial interest. So our values and culture as a people is a contributing factor. We are more subjective, looking at what will I get? Our indigenous. So I'm talking of two things here. Our indigenous culture is more extensive and is more extended, which is very good. It is more communal, our indigenous culture. When you compare the African culture to the Western culture, you realize that the Western culture rides more on individualism. The African culture also has the aspect of communalism, which is a very good aspect. So this is one thing we can derive or extract from our indigenous culture in driving civic engagements in solving our contemporary African challenges. One of it is to reawaken the communal dimension of our indigenous culture. Now, because of the global connectivity through technology, the influx of individualism from the West is really also gaining grounds within the African context. And because of that, many people are now thinking about what is there for them. So when civic engagement deals more with volunteerism. What you can offer, it is not more of what I'm going to gain. So when they open themselves up to this and they realize that this is more of what I am going to give for the common good of the people and many other reasons, that it becomes an apathy or lack of interest. Again, there is distrust in government or systems. It is one of the battles we have to undo in the African setting. So even when you are bringing in an element, just a case in point, I'm using Ghana because, of course, that is my own Jerusalem. There is one case where there has been hospital equipment, hospital bed, and then other very, very powerful equipment that is being donated freely to Ghana. Now, when these organizers of this huge donation got to our port, there has been an insistence that they will have to clear it by a huge sum of money through the taxes. As against in our provisions, in terms of our constitutional provisions through the acts of parliament, when the parliamentarians are clearing, they have the full access to clear anything of theirs, no matter the price or the amount, without having to pay those taxes. In other words, there is a provision in our parliamentary proceedings that gives our parliamentarians the ability to clear their, luxurious cars or whatever things of theirs by waiving the taxes. And when there is a donation, free donation that has arrived at the port, it could sometimes be there and literally rot. 3 years, it can be there because there is the need to pay huge sums of money. So one of the barriers to civic engagement in our context is the distrust in the systems as well as the government. Lack of education, awareness creation is very minimal, socioeconomic inequalities, digital divide, and then the language and cultural barriers. Maybe the context of your civic engagement may require the local dialect, may require certain cultural adjustment. And we know people are not just quick when it comes to matters of change, especially when it has to do with things rooted in their tradition. And then one key thing is the political polarization I made mention of. So how we practice our kind of polarized partisan politics, where it is almost like the winner takes it all. So the one who is ruling or the party in power as against opposition, it is something else. So now anything of yours is interpreted from a political lens. So you may be doing it genuinely for the common good of your nation or community or society or state or region, but it is going to be interpreted or possibly misinterpreted from the light of the political lens. So if it is in favor of the ruling power, then you are going to have a problem with the opposition. If it is not in favor with the ruling power, then the ruling power will band you together with opposition. So these are some of the major barriers in our context of civic engagement. The next slide. So what are some of the strategies we can engage in promoting civic education? There are several, civic engagement, there are several of them. One is the civic education in schools, and then engaging in leadership development programs. Personally, I am very much avowed when it comes to matters of leadership development programs. One of our challenges as a continent or as a people is that we are not raising and training deliberately the next batch of leaders, the next generation of leaders. We complain a lot concerning the immediate or the present mismanagement of the leaders. But some way, somehow, we are not concerned that 20 years' time, it is not going to be these same leaders. It is going to be the young and emerging generation. So all these are various outlets: a civic education in schools, a deliberate leadership development program, community forums, and listening sessions, which opens or grants the opportunity for many people to share their thoughts, a form of a public parliament where people share their thoughts, openly, so that we can arrive at a logical conclusion for the way forward. Access to tools and platforms for participation, inclusive policies and practices. As we said, in rolling out policies, they should be data-driven. It should be research-based. It should not be driven just out of mere political populism and matters like that. And building trust, leveraging technology. This is an area that all of us into civic engagements, or will be in civic engagement, should be looking out for. Technology has made it easier to scale above most of the pressing barriers or challenges in our ecosystem. And it is something we can latch on to drive effective civic engagement. And we must celebrate civic engagement as a culture, so that by so doing, it becomes received, or it gains roots in our culture, that this is the way to go. That the upcoming generation can look at it as something they can also embrace. The next slide, please. The role of the youth in civic engagement. The youth, of course, everyone can engage in civic engagements, but definitely in our context, where in Africa you have about 60, 65 to 70% of our population being the youth. And then we are also, Africa is, as it's called, the youngest continent that we have. It means that the youth plays a vital role in civic matters of civic engagement. So social mobilization. And as we connect it to the innovators and tech-driven leaders. So here, when we get to most of our social media platforms, unfortunately, we are giving much to entertainment, to music, and then unfortunately lasciviousness, lust-driven things. So most of our young ladies and most of our young guys, when you rush to the African dominated elements with TikTok and Facebook Live, it has become either discussions on sex, discussions on various things, dance here. So most of the things that makes wave in our context has to do more with dance challenges. Almost every now and then, there is a dance challenge, there's a new song, there's a dance challenge here and there. But we are not to bedevil these things, but rather, because take it or leave it, the youth, you are going to find them there. So our question is not to neglect it and then see it as faulty. It is more of, it is neutral. It depends on the users. Currently, the users or the influencers, the social media influencers in the African setting predominantly has to be with entertainment and things like that. So we can also pitch ourselves within that ecosystem and now raise more sane discussions that are looking at future-oriented elements, decision-making, problems, volunteerism, activism. There are also a few people doing great work on the social media as well. So the youth particularly, that we have almost 60 to 70% of our population being the youth. This is either a golden opportunity or a ticking time bomb, depending. And I believe that it is time for us to engage these elements to bring them out of the current state to a more useful state. The next slide, please. Yeah, so it leads to what I was talking about, the technology and then civic engagement. And then through this, we can also put on a lot of accountability tools. Now, the power of technology can never be over or underestimated. We can put on a lot of transparency and then accountability tools, which in turn can also create various streams of opportunities when it comes to even job creation, because this will help in placing what we call systems and controls. So in systems and controls, if we can engage the use of technology as with the youth, we can also track a lot of things when it comes to our governance. That's the e-governance, the digital feedback, move a bit more from paperwork. And then also do some petitions. There are petitions through hashtags, through various elements that can drive a whole lot of things. I hope you remember things like Black Lives Matter. That is with George Floyd's thing. It is a typical example of raising an online petition. And then a place like change.org, where you can also push petitions and then people can latch onto it to draw their attention. I remember in Nigeria, you had the End SARS, where it also drove a lot of online energy. Yeah, so technology in civic engagement, regardless of the aspect or the type of civic engagement, we must understand that technology has come to stay. And 5 or 10 years or 15 years to come, most of the things, the hard stuffs, will be giving room to soft stuffs. So whatever engagement you are rolling out, make room to accommodate the technology dimension of it. The AIs, the apps, we should get into it because it has a serious role to play. And as I said, it also helps us to be able to scale over many of the challenges. You can be addressing even 10K people, 10,000 people from the comfort of your home, which is a huge army of people driving change without having to go and then pay for an auditorium that can take about 10,000 and all that. The next slide. So measuring impact is very much also important. As I said, there must be an end goal. And in systemic thinking, you look at how do I progress? Yeah, so we know, I'm sure we know how the SMART goals, so that they should be specific, measurable, and all that. So measuring is ability to be able to measure how we are progressing. That is the civic education in schools, the voter turnout rates. So if you want to run any civic engagement, you should look at how things were before you started. And then 1 year into, 2 years into, 5 years into, you also assess how is the work you are doing translating? That is the survey or feedback results. You shouldn't just be obsessed just with the zeal and you are running. There is no measurement to it. So if you run for 10 years, how can we assess or ascertain that before you came onto the scene, this was how things were? 10 years down the line, we can see the tangibles. So always work with what we call the KPIs, which I'm sure we know, that the key performance indicators, that in this civic engagement that I am rolling out, what are my key performance indicators so that we can also measure it? Is there increased civic knowledge among the population? And what are the feedback results? Is it influencing policy? These are some of the things we should be looking out for in measuring our progress as far as our civic engagements are concerned. The next slide. Okay, so as we prepare ourselves to have our Q&A, I'm sure many of us may have certain questions or perspectives you also share on this subject. Basically, this happens to be the call to action. That use your voice for change. Use your resources. So to summarize everything that we have there, is that use your resources. So your resources will include your money, it will include your time, it will include your knowledge, it will include your skills, it will include every aspect, that is ability to inspire others, ability to also collaborate with others, and all other aspects of it. So the call to action is that as we go through these models, if you are already running a form of civic engagement, then you should be retooling it, engage much more of, also look at how you can embrace technology in that narrative, and then also look at how you can make it measurable, and then look at how you can also partner. It is not to be in competition, but rather to collaborate with other people or other organizations that are doing things connected to what you are doing for the common good or the end goal that you have in mind altogether. And if you are not yet in any form of civic engagement, then this is also a charge and a challenge to us that after going through sessions or trainings like this, it should stimulate in you the desire to either join or form a civic group that can run on its own, and then also connect us as on the broader sense. The next slide. Great. Okay, so I will draw down the curtains at this point. Definitely, I will continue in closing it where we can have a conclusion and then some work for us to brood over. But before then, let me pause at this place, and then I think we can open the floor for thought sharing, perspectives, and questions. Thank you very much for having me.
Participants, the floor is open. Let's observe the usual etiquette. If you would like to ask a question, please raise a virtual hand and you'll be asked to unmute. Saludin Habib, go ahead, unmute, ask a question. Saludin, you're not audible at all. You're not audible at all. Right. Saludin, you're not audible at all.
Okay, I suggest maybe if you could consider typing it in the comment section so that.
Yes, please type your question in the chat box. Whilst he's doing that, anyone else, please raise your virtual hand. Come on, guys. I'm sure you have a lot of questions for Dr. Safo. Raise your virtual hand. If you want any particular section of the presentation slide to be represented so that you can use it to situate your question, please say so. Yes. Okweoluwa, please go ahead, unmute and ask your question.
Thank you so much, sir. Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the lecture tonight concerning the civic engagement, as well as the youth involvement. And you also spoke on something that actually touched me particularly for what we did through our CSO organization in the year 2023. Now after thereof, talking about the reactionary position of different organizations, especially to issues of national development. You know, then towards the general election of 2023, we organized advocacy on concerning the youth participation in the election, and we mobilized different local governments in Lagos for young people to be specific, for them to visit each of the local governments of the INEC in Lagos, and that yielded results. So my question, going forward, since there was no major, or there's no election after that period, especially for Lagos, because of limited resources, we couldn't move to different parts of the country. So my question is, how, beyond the election, whether there's election or not, how do we sustain and such a movement to engage the youth in our country, Nigeria, especially the West? Thank you so much, sir.
Dr. Safo, did you get that?
Yes, I think I lost him at the latter side.
Let me just briefly summarize and contextualize it. Opeoluwa is saying that beyond the normal election cycles, how does one sustain civic engagement of the youth in the political process?
Please come again. Sorry, I think I had some breakage.
Outside the normal election cycle, the question is, what strategies, what approach can one use to sustain youth engagement in civic awareness and civic responsibility so as to impact and promote change?
Okay. Thank you very much. I think I get it now. Yes, so obviously raising elements during elections, as good as they are, as he rightly said, will fall under the category of reactionary. Now, why do we intend to engage the youth during elections? It is because we either assume or presume that their level of thinking or their perspectives when it comes to matters of nation building is quite faulty and skewed. Hence, the need for us to engage them so that they could vote wisely, looking at their all that. So tentatively, it is actually late if the point at which you are engaging them is in the heat of the election. So it is good, but it is reactionary. It means that majority of the work ought to be done after the elections. So awareness creations are done and many others before or during elections, fine. In those times, from my experience, I think that it will have very little impact. Now, post that, most places have a 4-year cycle, electionary cycle. That is where the main work really lies. So some of it becomes in one, raising the advocacy, the picture, the things you wanted to communicate to them during the election, that they should be more patriotic, They should be more necessarily looking at the future of our nation and many others. Those things should be developed into concepts, into values that you then get them in the school. So there are four major areas. One area is in the schools. So there could be a structured visitation to the schools, maybe the basic level all through to the tertiary level, where there is the power of information is in its consistency. So there is consistency in the advocacy aspect when it comes to the communication, what you want them to know, the perspectives you want them to have on nation building, national development, politics, leadership, governance, etc., etc. Now, whilst that is also ongoing, as we said, the youth are driven much more also at the technology side, that is social media. So as we get to the schools, another enclave where we should be focusing is piping this same information in the language of the social media. And it must be consistent. It should not be just once a while. It should be consistent. And then we could also look at the religious, as we said, faith-based communities, the various churches, the various mosques. If we could get certain elements where once a while, even if it is monthly, if it is weekly, if it is quarterly, there is a form of nation building discourse from the pulpits or from the religious centers. So it means that if we can hijack, and then the fourth element is at the home or the family life or the family element where parents can also deliberately instill. But at least if we can focus with advocacy on these three streams, one, the schools, two, the media, and then three, the religious, that is the churches and then the mosques, then we would have been making a serious trend. So now this would have run on for 4 years before the next batch of election. If we withdraw and wait till the next batch of election, we will get little to no kind of results. And the last thing I'll add, so two things, three things. One is the advocacy, exploring these three streams, the media, the religious fraternities, as well as the schools. Number two is the aspect of empowerment. Now, the empowerment is to say that as you push the advocacy, the end goal is not just to make the person knowledgeable. The end goal is that the person will start start thinking in a different manner and then living in a different manner. Now, some of these efforts to change their lives and change their way of thinking comes with adjustment. And some of these adjustments are quite challenging. Sometimes it has an emotional challenge. Sometimes it has an economic implication for them to really, though you're giving them the information through the advocacy, but for them to really shift their way of thinking and in doing things from the usual narrative, it is almost like swimming against the tide. And there must be some form of empowerment that supports them. So, for instance, you are talking about nation building to a street guy who is hustling. In his immediate context, it is survival. So what you are talking about as nation building, democracy, governance is way above his head. He may listen to you nodding his head, but it will not go anywhere. So you also look at the situation of the person and what can be done to support or to empower him or her so that he can have that luxury of attention to commit to these things. And then finally is mentorship. Now, the depth of, shall I say, mindset challenge we have as a people is not going to be solved just by intermittent conferences like annual conferences, symposiums, workshops. Our problem is deeply entrenched. And any kind of transformation that will be sustainable should look at a deliberate commitment to mentor the youth. So if it ends only on the point of advocacy or maybe annual flagship programs, they will have some trinkets of impact, but it is not so powerful enough to effect a holistic reorientation, because the cultural dimension, the religious dimension, the socio-political dimension, and the various dimensions that has shall I say, eating away the sanity and sanctity of our thinking is serious, which requires deliberate mentorship. So to put everything together, the real work starts after the elections, and they should be looked at in these three layers: holistic advocacy through consistent, not once a while information, by looking at the religious, the schools, and then the media. Number two, empowerment to take them off their immediate challenge so that they can also have that commitment to it. And then most especially, mentorship. There should be a systemic or a structured mentorship system that we pass these young fellows through. And it will therefore mean that that is where it leads to the collaboration I was talking about. Maybe your civic engagement is along the lines of advocacy. So there will be the need to partner other civic engagements that may be along the lines of empowerment. And then also co-partner other civic engagements which may be along the lines of mentorship. So we should not see these things as competition, but as a collaborative effort. So imagine there is a full-scale advocacy group, also a full-scale empowerment group, and then a full-scale mentorship group. And then there is, a resonating partnership amongst them. You see that by the 4 years' time, the next 4 years during election, there will be little work or little to no work needed in the heat of the elections. The minds of the people have undergone systemic and structured reorientation, and it will reflect in their elections or their choice of the next leader. I trust I have given some point on it.
Okwelua, do you have appropriate guidance now on your question?
Absolutely, sir. It's a wake-up call for me and my team to do more.
Excellent. I would add that not only do more, but do it consistently and all the time, not only during election cycles. Thank you very much. Let's go to the next question. Saludin Adebayo couldn't speak because of network issues, but he has typed his question. He wants to know a bit more about indigenous knowledge as presented during the lecture today. Dr. Safo, are you able to respond?
Please come again.
Saludin wants to have some clarification on what you mean by indigenous knowledge as presented during the slides today. Indigenous knowledge.
Okay. Great. All right. So indigenous suggests local or traditional. So in our quest to solve the African challenges of African context, we cannot solve it effectively if we are not also driving or deriving certain things from our local or our indigenous or our traditional. So these are all synonyms. So indigenous basically means the local knowledge or our cultural knowledge or our traditional knowledge. Now, sometimes we are quick to almost rubbish or paint everything black as though everything about our culture is negative. And there seems to be that anything good must be an imported culture from the Western world, but that is not so. Yes, we admit that our culture has a number of negative things, negative vibes, negative, or shall I say, limits progress to some extent. But within that same local or traditional culture, there are also other strands of lessons, strands of perspectives, or strands of knowledge. And I gave a typical example that our culture is more communal, though we are gradually losing it because of the Western influx of individualism. So if we can embrace that communal spirit, then because civic education rise or civic engagement rise much more on communalism rather than individualism. So this is a typical example of a communal, or shall I say, an indigenous knowledge, which we can extract, embrace in order to solve contemporary African challenges. And one example is what I gave, that when we are looking at, because individualism drives more of competition and it has its place, but in civic engagements, once all of us, we are having the ultimate good of the people or of our nation, of our society, at the back of our minds, then it should not be competitive, it should rather be collaborative. And that is riding on communalism, or that communal aspect. Another aspect is understanding the knowledge, that is the indigenous knowledge, how we do our things, will help you when you are bringing a concept which may be foreign to the African narrative, but it may be very good. So when you are bringing it, you, because of your knowledge, or you are well versed in the indigenous culture and knowledge, it becomes easier for you to now plant it within that soil. Else, you push everything aside, and then you are just going to bring that thing, and then it will seem as though it's not working. A case in point is democracy. Yeah, so we embrace democracy hook, line, and sinker. We did not contextualize democracy. So democracy is a good way of governance, but in importing it, we should have really known our context and then known how to adjust it if need be in situating it to be more effective. So basically, that is it. I trust I've answered your question as well. Maybe the next question.
Thank you very much. We'll take Halima, whose hand is raised first, before I go to the chat box and continue with the other questions. Halima, unmute yourself and ask a question. Thank you. Halima, please ask your question.
Okay, can you hear me, sir? Having learned from, listened to the lecture,
Yeah, breaking up, Halima. We can't hear you. Halima, you're on mute. Unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, go ahead.
I said in situations when civic responsibility conflicts with personal interests, how should that be handled? And then the second question is, when you involve yourself, when you involve yourself too much in civic responsibility, does it lead to burnout or conflict? And if it does, how can it also be handled?
Okay, great. Yeah, so the first one is more or less the balance between personal interest, and
Yes.
then and then as we are talking about the common good of the people, definitely, once you get into this zone or arena, you cannot or you may not delineate your personal interest entirely from it, because ultimately what you are doing is you have a commitment of passion to what you are doing. And there is nothing wrong when some proceeds, some opportunities, some platforms, some access comes on, and then you are engaging it. Yeah, so by way of clarification, it is not to paint the place of personal interest. Rather, the point is that the personal interest must not take the epicenter or the central reason why you are engaging it. Then that becomes a purely selfish thing. So in that case, like what some people do, because they seem to know that there are a lot of funding agencies, international funding agencies, they really don't have the heart of the people at hand. So they'll just put together some proposal, go to the villages, take some snapshots of their dilapidated, houses or structures, and then gather some of the village people and then push it. That this is what we want to do. Now the money comes. So the true test of the state of your heart is going to show when the funding start coming. Your budgetary allocation can make it clear that you started it merely for your personal interest. But that is not to say that there is a funding has come, and then maybe you have done allocations, and then some also goes into at least helping to relieve you of certain challenges as a vision bearer or the team, and then engaging to be able to expand the vision itself. So in summary, personal interest may not be entirely cut off from the common good. However, the common good should be the starting point, or it should be the central element that drives one into the civic engagement. And the natural consequence of the common good is that he that waters shall himself be watered. So if your focus is watering, then the natural logical conclusion will be that there will be certain elements that will also come your way as a result of it. So your personal interest should be kept at the peripheral, whilst the common good or the interest of the common good or the society should be kept at the central. And can you come again with your second question? I think I lost you on that.
All right. I am asking if too much civic involvement can lead to conflict or burnout, even. And if it happens or it can lead to that, how can that be managed?
Yes, so it is an obvious yes, as you gave. I mean, too much of it can lead to burnout. It's just like it is not peculiar to civic engagement. It's literally to every endeavor. So because it has the potential for one to exhaust, and then you run into burnout, and then you know that the consequence of it becomes limited or decreased passion, and then even depression, especially discouragement, whatever it may be. What I would suggest is that one, always have an end goal before you set off. This is very crucial, and you can see that I've repeated it in several narratives. Always have clarity of an end goal. This is where I really want to get to. That is one. Number two, have the fidelity of purpose. The fidelity of purpose is that know your niche within the narrative. Now you know that this is my end goal, but that end goal will require multi-dimensional and multifactorial elements for that end goal to be solved. your singular your singular contribution is not enough to solve that end goal comprehensively. So you must know the end goal. Number two, you must underscore your niche. What is the focal area of what you want to get into? Now, number three is to also underscore your limitations. Else, you are going to you are going to burn out. You are going to be exhausted. So you underscore your limitation. And then that means that you know what we call the fidelity of purpose. This is my cutoff point. This is where I am committed to. So by underscoring my limitations, it then opens room for me to do the fourth element, which is progress. And since your civic engagement alone is not enough to bring about the or collaborative civic engagements to be able to arrive at the end goal. So if you are not in collaborations, what will happen is that you will be putting in so much energy, but you will see that the problem you are trying to solve, it is only a tip of an iceberg. And you think it is just a small thing, but there is a whole, literally mountain beneath it. So and that is where systemic thinking or analysis of the problem also comes in, which I've made mention of. So number four is that collaboration. So in collaboration, you then stay true to your calling, or you stay true, you limit yourself much more to your niche, where you can deliver and deliver excellently. And you collaborate with others who are also touching on other places or niches all together to be able to get there. If this is not done, then what is going to happen is that you set off, but there is no clarity of purpose. Things become hazy. You don't seem to see the change that you're out of zeal. You set off. You become discouraged. You see somebody doing something. You think, okay, then tomorrow you are doing this. The next day you are doing this. There seems not to be a coordinated effort, and the obvious end result is that you burn out. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we'll take a question from the chat room. Rebecca Nenshi says, are there civic education organizations that interested participants can join? I'll answer that. Yes, you are part of one. Africa Leadership Group School of Leadership and Governance is an organization that you can join. In his introduction, Dr. Safo mentioned that he is the founder and executive director of a civic educational group in Ghana. So there are many partner organizations that the Africa Leadership Group is working with. And part of the feedback survey form, if you have participated in it, is to ask which one of you as participants wants to have further training in civic education. So you need to indicate your interests so that we can get in touch with you after this program has been completed. And depending on how well you have performed, each of these models has sets of assignment and homework. You will not graduate if you do not do your homework. You will not graduate if you do not do your assignment. So it will be pointless wanting to go into civic education to help others if you don't yourself develop the stamina and the resilience to go through this initial training. I hope I've answered the question, Rebecca. Okay, let's move on. Asabe says, what approach would someone use in a community that doesn't care about their future and only about what they can get immediately? I think Dr. Safo has mentioned that previously, but I'll allow him to respond to that. I yield to you, Dr. Safo.
Okay. Interesting question. Okay, so there is a mantra that, well, you can give the people what they want, in order to give them what they need. It is obvious you are dealing with, so that is also a form of contextualism. So your context here is that the people don't seem to care about their future, and then they are only looking at more or less like survival, what they will eat, what they will wear. So it means here that it is a mindset problem. But now the immediate context may be that they are, let's say, having issues of unemployment or whatever the issue, the immediate issue may be. So that is where you then help them in that immediate thing. Because if you just go off and then you are talking about heavy things like worldview, how you can be futuristic and then all that, I mean, the more you exert pressure or force or energy, the more they are going to laugh at your efforts. And that is where discouragement then come in. It means that you did not analyze the problem well. So the contextualism here is that, well, look at a meeting, if possible, some of the needs of their immediate attention. So if you, the civic group, you have what it takes, that's fine. If you don't have what it takes because of the niche you have carved for yourself, that is where collaboration comes in. So you collaborate with certain individuals or other power groups that are into more of these supportive elements, which I call the empowerment. So by so doing, you are able to win their hearts, you are able to win their affections, because they begin to assume that they are dealing with somebody who cares for them. In their minds, the definition of care is somebody who is attending to their immediate care, their immediate needs. But the true definition of care is that somebody who's looking at their future. But when you do the level one, like Abraham Maslow's need, you can then scale up to the self-actualization. So in short, either you engage or you collaborate with individuals and other groups that can help to reduce or quench a bit of the immediate fires for which their focus is on. And then once you've won their attention and affection, you can then latch on that and then engage elements of trainings, conferences, mentorship to reorient their minds onto that. And then you can measure. And by 5 years' time, 10 years' time, we will come to that space and we say that before you started, this was a place that did not care about their future. But 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, we are having majority of them who are now futuristic. And that is a very good plus.
Very well said, Dr. Safo. Thank you. Asabe, does that answer your question? All right, we move on. Ahmed Isa says his suggestion is civic education should be taught in university systems as a general course because it touches everyone directly and indirectly, regardless of profession. I don't know whether you have a comment to that suggestion, Dr. Safo.
Oh, I think it's an obviously a supportive comment. So very right, very, very right. So if it is inoculated into our educational system, we can have many people thinking along that line, volunteerism, advocacy, and all that. And then it also creates streams of employment as well, because some of these tend out to become organizations. So as it provides for the people, it also raises a whole lot of employment. So instead of just completing school and then taking your certificate to go and look for a job, which in most cases is not there, some of these elements can also create employment on its own. So I'm all for it. Very, very powerful.
Great. The last question will be from Dr. Jibril Lawal. He can't, he has network issues, so he's going to type his question. Go ahead and type your question so that we can read it out for all. Whilst Dr. Jibril Lawal is doing that, is there anyone else who wants to raise a virtual hand to ask a question? This will be the last two questions before we go back to the slide and conclude the presentation for today. Thank you very much, Jibril Mohammed. Says very interesting Q&A session. Kudos to you, Dr. Safo. Dr. Jibril Lawal says, what social skills and mentorship skills does one need to involve youth in civic education, civic engagement, sorry. What social and mentorship skills does one need to involve youth in civic engagement? I yield to you, Dr.
All right.
Safo.
So, yes, sir. Okay. So, of course, a number of skills, but some of which I could mention when it comes to the social aspect, then definitely we will be talking about the communication skills, various elements of it, because you will have to sell out your idea. You will have to communicate by giving compelling elements, whether through, so under communication, whether it is one-on-one, whether it is official presentation with slides, whether it is a roundtable discussion, various forms that formed or that falls under the aspect of communication. So one would be communication skills, and then two will also be problem-solving skills, because you are setting off on a journey to solve every civic engagement has an end goal, as reiterated, and the end goal is to solve an aspect of a problem in a larger nuance of problems that we have. So problem-solving skills also presents as one. And then also you could be looking at the aspect of, we could be looking at the aspect of the so critical thinking and analytical skills also happens to be one. And then it also helps with the systemic analysis. You are going to break down the points into various elements. Maybe the last but one, maybe relational skills, because you're going to deal with various categories of people, various different temperaments and dispositions. So your ability to deal with people, your ability to solve problems, your ability to correspond with them, think critically, and all that. And then also economic management. If definitely every civic engagement, even advocacy, also has a touch of matters that deals with money. Yeah, so economic management, ability, in fact, the mobilization and management, ability to mobilize or raise the necessary funding, and then also upon mobilizing it, the ability to also manage it effectively, and many others. And then maybe mentorship skills, but that's the last one I will add, the mentorship skills. So most of these skills are not essentially natural. Some may have it even as natural, but even if it is natural, it will be in a crude form. You must be deliberate about it and then intentionally develop the skill. So that's a very key and critical question. If you want to go into civic engagement, then you must sharpen all these skills that must be, and then even negotiation skills. In fact, the skills are just, several. You are pitching the idea to possible investors, to government, to policymakers. And because of that, you should be able to also have negotiation skills. So a number of skills comes to play, but I think these ones will suffice for now.
Thank you very much. We're running out of time. We don't want to take more time than necessary. So we're going to take just one more question from the chat room. After that, you can put any other questions you have in our WhatsApp group, and Dr. Safo will find the time to respond to it. So the last question from the chat group before we conclude the lecture is, how can corruption be defeated while using systemic analysis on issues of advocacy? This is from Olusanjo.
Okay, so corruption is a multi-headed monster in our system, especially in the African context. And as it has been, as the person rightly said, if you do systemic analysis, so advocacy presents as one of them. Yeah, so advocacy alone will not be enough to deal with matters of corruption. So that the subject opens up for wider deliberations based on the immediate context that we find ourselves. But what I can say is that, one, advocacy, which is almost like a mandatory requirement because it creates awareness, it drives many people's attention to what is really going on, statistics, data that is rich. So painting the best possible picture for many people to get is very crucial. Now, apart from that, so it is a dual approach in summary. That is the bottom-up approach and then the top-down approach. The bottom-up approach has to do with advocacy as well as imbibing anti-corrupt cultures. Yeah, so there are various anti-corrupt values that can be stimulated. Once again, that should be deliberately inculcated, yeah, at the school level, at the home level, in our churches, in our mosques, that's the religious level, and then also in the media. So all these presents as mentorship where you deliberately invest these anti-corrupt values in the generation coming. Now, the top-down approach becomes the political will of the governing leadership to be able to enforce. That means that, so the enforcement comes with drafting the right things when it comes to the constitution and then all the bylaws that should be enough or should be strong enough to have a biting force, not most of the kind that we have. That is number one. Number two is, after we have gotten our rules, our constitution and things in that particular way, another way to look at it is also to enforce. And that is where the real issue is, to enforce the laws. By enforcing the laws, anyone who becomes a culprit found in any wanton dissipation of state funds, whatever it is, the person should be able to pay for it. So when there is punishment for corruption, as stipulated in the given laws, it becomes a deterrent and then it begins to speak enough. So there must be the bottom-up approach, which includes advocacy, which includes reorientation, which includes anti-corrupt values, mentoring the new people with it, the offices, and then all that, values that are anti-corrupt, and building into our culture so that our culture naturally will frown on corruption. And then there must be the top-down approach, which will include the aspect of making the necessary anti-corrupt laws and then para laws, and then above all, enforcing the laws. which grants punishment to all them that are involved in corruption. I think that this dual approach, in addition to what has been said, we'll be able to get some tangible results out of it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Safo. For those interested in the issue of corruption and how to combat it, Dr. Safo's next lecture or module is on this very issue. So on Saturday, he'll be taking a deep dive into corruption, strategies on how to combat it, etc., etc. So tune in, don't miss that. Thank you. Let's go to the presentation and so we can round up. I will re-share so that Dr. Safo can finish up. You have the floor, sir.
Yes, sir. So by way of conclusion, one, we're saying that civic engagement is the heartbeat of a thriving society. Obviously, we cannot leave. De Gaulle said that politics is so serious a business for us to leave it only to the politicians. It's a very, very powerful statement that politics is so serious a business for you to leave, or for us to leave it only into the hands of the politicians, which suggests that citizenship failure precedes leadership failure. So, and civic engagement drives the citizenry to add on to the leadership to give a thriving society, because it builds trust, unity, and shared responsibility. Any nation or people that the masses are passive, innate, inactive, and bland, and all what they do is that they fold their arms watching the political players to do whatever they are doing, does not score as a thriving society. Again, every action counts. Whatever you are doing, do not underestimate it. Every action counts, because all these will form the little tributaries that is going to pull into a mighty ocean. So every action really counts. It is not a one-time event, but a continuous commitment. We've said that the need and the place of consistency when it comes to matters of civic engagement is a non-negotiable requirement. Very, very important. The next slide. So please, the next slide.
Yeah, just give me a minute. I'm trying to get it to work.
Okay. Okay, again, we've made mention of the fact that the youth, technology, and innovation are driving forces. Very important. Why the youth? The youth, because in our context, again, the African context, we have majority of our population being the youth. And it is, in fact, the envy of all continents. And if we can harness on the energy, the passion, the zeal, and the drive with the youth, we can really go far. And technology has come to stay. We must just embrace it. And the good thing is that technology finds its favorite majority with the youth. So if we embrace the youth, connect it with technology, get our messages by embracing or contextualizing it within the digital ecosystem, will really, really go far. And as we said, it will help us to scale above some of the barriers or the challenges we made mention of. Again, we have indicated that stronger communities start with you. So it starts with you, and as we build that collaboration, it becomes a mighty force. It becomes a mighty force. So your voice, your presence, your service can ignite transformation in your neighborhood. So all what that you either join or you begin something. Let us all be very active when it comes to the element of civic engagement. Is it done, or is there any other slide? Okay, so the final is that let's build a culture of engagement where everyone feels seen, everyone feels heard, and everyone is responsible, not just a reserve of some special elite somewhere, but everyone should be engaged as far as matters of civic duties are concerned. And once we are part of the society, then civic duties becomes part of our responsibilities. Very, very important that we should keep that in mind. So to draw down the curtains of this presentation, our final words is that we rise by lifting others. We build stronger communities by showing up, speaking out, and standing together. If there is any form of corruption, if there is any form of ill governance, if there is any form of repression and oppression of the people, and then we keep quiet, then we become accomplices of that problem going on. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. And prayer is that all of us will have the right mindset, perspectives, and passion and renewed zeal in committing to matters of civic engagement. Thank you very much. I think there should be an assignment, right? Maybe. Okay, so because this is a school, definitely we cannot end without drawing attention to some key points. So I'm sure that I can see that the slides have been shared on the page. So you share thoughts by way of your assignment on these stars. Which of the following best describes civic engagement? And then whether true or false, civic responsibility includes only obeying laws and paying taxes. And then our short answer, list two benefits that communities experience when citizens actively engage in civic life. I think the answers are just naturally beckoning on all of us. And then a scenario-based question. So you notice a lack of clean drinking water in your community. As a civically engaged citizen, what steps might you take to help address this issue? This is very, very important. So as you try to roll it out, be thinking about the end goal, be thinking about the systemic analysis or assessment of the problem, be thinking about other things we've made mention of to arrive at a comprehensive approach towards it. The next slide. Okay, so this is also the class assignment for us, that discuss the role of civic engagement in building stronger and more resilient communities. In your response, analyze at least two specific strategies that individuals or groups can use to promote civic participation and evaluate their potential impact, again, in the context of African nation states. And these are some of the guidelines for our engagement. So of course, you define the key term, the civic engagement and its relevance. You use examples from your local context or other African communities to support your argument. So here you look at if there's a data, if there's a statistic, if there's a historical antecedent, that is what you also chip in. You consider both challenges and opportunities in promoting civic engagement. And it should be around 800 to 1,000 words in length. So once again, thank you very, very, very much this evening, and then we'll meet for our next session at a due time. Mr. Albert, over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Safo. Thank you very much for your labor of love, for a very interesting presentation and the very interactive engagement in the Q&A session. God bless. A few housekeeping rules for participants. As always, you have homework to do, you have assignments to do. You should do them in the model group. And as appropriate, you will get responses from either Dr. Safo or myself from the answers or responses you are providing to the assignments. The second is that everybody who has participated in each model is required to complete the attendance and feedback survey form. The feedback survey form will change with each module as we try to capture ideas which we believe we will want your responses to. So for example, in the last two feedback survey forms, we ask which one of you wanted further training as trainer of trainers in civic education. The attendance and feedback survey form for this model will be slightly different. So don't just say that, oh, it's the same all the time, so there's no point in me answering it. It's not the same. What we're trying to do is to capture all the ideas that are permeating through all the modules so that at the end of the course, we can generate a comprehensive analysis of the issues discussed, the challenges that have been identified, and the solutions which all of us collectively, both participants and facilitators, have put forward in terms of addressing issues of civic education in our continent. That's it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, and we'll see you all again on Saturday, 8 p.m. Saturday's session will be taken again by Dr. Safo, and we'll be addressing the issue of corruption and how this affects or impacts on civic responsibility and civic awareness. Thank you all, and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Good night.